This is the most famous royal romance scandal and unsolved mystery in the history of the empire. In 1650, a man died after falling from his horse during a hunting trip. Before his death, he was the most powerful regent of the Qing Empire. He controlled the military, and even the emperor had to bow to him. The emperor held a grand funeral in his honor, but just 2 months later, everything changed. The emperor suddenly declared him the greatest criminal of the empire. His tomb was opened, his body was publicly whipped, and his family was implicated and purged. Many people believe that behind all of this, there was only one reason: he may have taken the emperor's mother for himself. This woman was one of the most powerful women in Chinese history. She never claimed the throne, yet she influenced the fate of 3 emperors in succession. She supported the empire, stabilized the regime, and helped lift a dynasty to its height. And yet, for hundreds of years, what people have discussed over and over again is not her political intelligence. Instead, they keep returning to one question. After her husband died, did she marry her husband's younger brother? She was Empress Dowager Xiaozhuang, and the man whose name is constantly linked to hers was one of the most controversial figures of the early Qing dynasty, Dorgon. Hi everyone, I'm Jason. This is A Different Story. Today, we're going to break down one of the most intriguing mysteries in Qing history. Where did the rumor between Xiaozhuang and Dorgon come from? Is there any truth to it? And why, even today, is it still brought up again and again? For many people, their first encounter with this story comes from TV dramas. In those versions, the young Xiaozhuang and Dorgon fall in love at first sight on the Mongolian steppe. They ride side by side across the grasslands, devoted to each other. But then fate suddenly shifts. After the founding ruler of the empire dies, a struggle for the throne erupts. Dorgon and his half-brother Hong Taiji are both imperial princes, both eligible to inherit the throne. In the end, Hong Taiji emerges victorious. Not only that, he forces Dorgon's mother to her death. From the very beginning, the fight for power is marked by blood. At the same time, there is also a legend that a lama once predicted that Xiaozhuang was destined to marry an emperor. Soon after, Hong Taiji marries the 13-year-old Xiaozhuang. In television dramas, this is portrayed as love stolen by power, a romance crushed by political ambition. But real history is far less sentimental. If you truly understand Manchu politics on the 17th century steppe, you'll realize how naive that version is. Xiaozhuang's marriage to Hong Taiji at the age of 13 was not about love. It wasn't even about beauty. It was a calculated political alliance. Essentially, a cold-blooded tribal merger. At the time, the Manchus were rising in the northeast. Different tribes all hoped to secure alliances with the royal house. Xiaozhuang's family, determined to bind themselves tightly to the imperial clan, essentially played a family package deal through marriage. First, Xiaozhuang's aunt married Hong Taiji, but she did not bear a son, so the family sent Xiaozhuang. Later, to strengthen the alliance even further, they even sent Xiaozhuang's own older sister, Hai Lanzhu, to become Hong Taiji's consort as well. An aunt and 2 sisters, all married to the same man. In the early marriage customs of the Manchus, this was not unusual. What Confucian moral codes in southern Han society would have labeled incestuous or improper was, in the eyes of the northern Manchus at the time, an efficient and practical political guarantee. And this cultural background planted the first seed for later rumors. In a royal house that did not strictly follow Han moral conventions, the idea of Dorgon marrying his widowed sister-in-law was, culturally speaking, not as unthinkable as it might seem. In 1643, Hong Taiji died suddenly. The throne was left vacant, the empire had only just been established, and the situation was extremely unstable. At that moment, Dorgon was the most prestigious military commander in the Qing army. He had battlefield achievements. He had authority. Many historians acknowledge that if he had chosen to claim the throne, then almost no one could have stopped him. But he didn't. A man whose ambition stood just 0.01 centimeters from the throne pulled back at the last second. Instead, he supported Xiaozhuang's 6-year-old son, Fu Lin, to ascend the throne, the boy who would later become the Shunzhi Emperor. Duo Ergun himself became Prince Regent. From that moment on, the power structure became extraordinarily delicate. A 6-year-old emperor, a regent who controlled the military, and the emperor's mother, Xiaozhuang. In the eyes of many, the relationship among these three was destined to be anything but simple. The earliest clear suggestion of a relationship between Xiaozhuang and Duo Ergun came from a poem. The poem described a lively scene in the Forbidden City celebrating the remarriage of the Empress Dowager. If an Empress Dowager were to remarry, it would have been a massive political scandal. In traditional Han culture, as the widow of the late emperor, an Empress Dowager was not supposed to remarry, let alone marry the regent. If Xiaozhuang had truly married Duo Ergun, the Shunzhi Emperor's position would have become deeply awkward. Duo Ergun would have been both a subject of the emperor and his stepfather. The entire structure of imperial paternal authority would have been thrown into chaos. It was precisely because of this dramatic moral conflict that the rumor spread rapidly among the people. But here's the problem. The author of that poem was a man from the fallen Ming dynasty. Having just experienced the collapse of his own state, he had every reason to resent the Manchus. He had ample motive to smear the new Qing rulers. And yet, if this had merely been political slander from an enemy, the rumor would not have survived for 300 years. The real fuse behind the speculation lies in a Manchu custom that, even today, makes many people uncomfortable: the practice of levirate marriage. In traditional Manchu society, there really was a marriage custom like this. When a husband died, his widow could be inherited by another male member of the family. A son could marry his stepmother after his father's death. A younger brother could marry his widowed sister-in-law after his older brother died. This was not seen as moral corruption. It was a survival strategy. In nomadic societies, populations were small and mortality rates were high. Marriage was not just personal, it represented alliances between tribes. Women were viewed as part of the family's political assets. If a husband died and the woman remained within the clan, it preserved bloodlines and maintained political ties. So from the standpoint of custom, Xiaozhuang's possible remarriage was not absolutely impossible. But here's the key issue. By this time, the Qing had already established itself as a unified empire. It now had to face the ethical standards of the southern Han Chinese elite. For a dynasty trying to build imperial legitimacy, would it really risk massive public backlash by openly allowing the Empress Dowager to remarry? In the historical records, there is no formal documentation of a wedding, no imperial decree, no official investiture document. Everything remains speculation. What truly escalated the controversy was a change in title. At first, the Shunzhi Emperor referred to Dorgon as Imperial Uncle and Prince Regent. Later, the title changed to Imperial Father and Prince Regent. Those two words, Imperial Father, dropped like a bombshell. Many people believe this suggests that Dorgon had effectively become the emperor's stepfather. But some scholars argue that in Manchu culture, the word father could function as an honorific title. It may have simply reflected Duo Ergun's immense contributions, a gesture of imperial respect. In letters from Mongol tribes to the emperor, the ruler was also sometimes addressed as Khan Father. Moreover, in the original Manchu language archives, there is no clear equivalent term that directly matches imperial father. It may have been a later translation issue. There is also a heartbreaking detail. In order to limit Xiaozhuang's influence over the young emperor, Duo Ergun reportedly ordered that mother and son could only see each other once a month. Some have speculated that this separation created space for private meetings between Xiaozhuang and Duo Ergun. Imagine it, a child only a few years old, forced to be separated from his mother, growing up while hearing endless rumors about her. That kind of psychological pressure may well have planted the seeds of resentment that would later explode in Shunzhi's shocking act of revenge against Duo Ergun. In 1650, Duo Ergun was thrown from his horse during a hunting trip. He died a few days later. He was only 38 years old. The Shunzhi Emperor's first reaction was very telling. He granted Duo Ergun the highest level of funeral honors and even posthumously elevated him to the status of emperor. But just 2 months later, once Shunzhi had truly secured power in his own hands, he revealed a level of hatred that shocked the court. He suddenly announced a list of multiple crimes attributed to Duo Ergun. He stripped him of his titles. He ordered Duo Ergun's coffin to be exhumed and his corpse publicly flogged. His family was purged. It was an extreme political reckoning. Many people believe this hatred came from something personal. If Duo Ergun had indeed forced Xiaozhuang into marriage, then Shunzhi's rage would have had an emotional motive. But it could just as easily have been pure power politics. An adult emperor had to completely erase the shadow of a former regent, and such a dramatic act was the most definitive political statement possible. More than 100 years later, Qianlong Emperor, Shunzhi's great-grandson, officially rehabilitated Duo Ergun's reputation. His merits and faults were reassessed, but the rumors surrounding Xiaozhuang never disappeared. In 1688, Xiaozhuang died. She left behind a puzzling final wish. She did not want to be buried alongside Hong Taiji. In traditional belief, it was only natural, even honorable, for an empress to be buried with her husband. Her refusal opened the door to endless speculation. Some say it was because of her feelings for Duo Ergun. More recently, some rumors have suggested an ambiguous relationship between her and Hong Chengqiu, a story I covered in a previous video. In any case, this final request left the Kangxi Emperor unable to decide how to bury her for a long time. It was not until 37 years later that Kangxi's son, the Yongzheng Emperor, built a separate mausoleum for her. In life, she stabilized an empire. In death, she rested alone. And now we come to the final question. Why has this story survived for so long, becoming one of the 3 great mysteries of the early Qing dynasty? We may never truly know whether Xiaozhuang actually married Duo Ergun. There is no direct evidence. And there is no clear denial either. But perhaps there's a more important question. Why, for hundreds of years, have people cared more about her alleged romance than about her political achievements? She assisted 3 generations of emperors. She helped persuade key generals to surrender to Hong Taiji. After Hong Taiji's death, she protected her son in the middle of a dangerous succession crisis. After the Shunzhi Emperor died young, she protected her grandson, Kangxi. Without her, the Qing Empire might have fractured and collapsed in its earliest years. And yet the way history often remembers her is strikingly simple: a woman at the center of a scandal. In a deeply patriarchal society, a woman who participates in top-level decision-making for decades is, by definition, an anomaly. And what is the cheapest way to attack an anomaly? A sexual scandal. It requires no evidence, no logic. It only needs to be repeated. Once a story is dramatic enough, it begins to grow on its own. This isn't just history. It still happens today. When a woman holds power in a complex political environment for a long time, people are often quicker to question her private life than to analyze her competence. Maybe that is the real reason this rumor has survived for so long. Xiaozhuang's decision not to be buried with Hong Taiji may not have been about shame at all. Perhaps it was because, in that cold imperial mausoleum, she would lie beside a husband and among men who treated her as property. Maybe the last thing she wanted was simply this: to rest as an independent self, no longer bound or defined by power. I'm Jason. This is a different story. And I hope that the next time you hear a so-called workplace scandal or celebrity gossip, you'll look beyond the sensational details and see the power struggles underneath and the deep bias that so often targets women. I'll see you in the next video.